Domestic violence affects, I think it's 1 in 3 women at some point during their lifetime. It's widespread and abuse takes many forms. There's been a recent campaign on Twitter using the hashtag maybe he doesn't hit you, and that sparked a widespread discussion online and around the world as to the many forms that domestic abuse does take. Often it's honed in that abuse is physical, but in fact domestic violence here and the definition in this country covers other forms like mental abuse, financial abuse, psychological abuse, and in particular controlling and coercive behaviour. In fact, in this country we've just acknowledged that as a criminal offence as well. So coercive and controlling behaviour is now punishable up to 5 years, and that covers acts like humiliation and intimidation of women. It includes controlling every aspect of their life, i.e. their social media, isolating them from friends, cutting off resources financially for them and making them dependent on the abuser. We see a lot of women who come in who, as I mentioned earlier on, have been isolated perhaps from family and friends, that they are constantly asked where they are going. They have to be accompanied by the other party. Again, their social media is maybe checked, their mobile phone is monitored. Financially, they may be only given provision for supplies that the other party wants them to get. They're not allowed to go to work, or they have their wages taken off them, and also they will often made to feel that they are a lesser person. They will be constantly belittled by the other side, called names, or generally made to feel that if they were to escape that relationship that they wouldn't be able to have support or find anybody else that would want them, and that then makes them become dependent on that person and makes it very difficult for them to escape that cycle of abuse. We have had men come through, and again that does seem to be on the rise in terms of men feeling like there is support out there and that they can come forward. We also have clients who are perhaps in not necessarily heterosexual relationships. That again is also something that is being reported more and more, and that's encouraging for us to see that parties are coming forward to seek that support, but there's still a way to go. Even after the cuts were brought in a few years ago, legal aid was still available for victims of domestic violence. The difficulty with that was that the regulations were quite strict, and evidence had to be provided to prove that they'd been a victim within the last 2 years. That has recently been extended and it's now 5 years. They've also now widened legal aid to include financial abuse as well. So just because there isn't physical abuse in a relationship, if there's financial abuse or emotional abuse, again, that's now included within the regulations, and we can assist victims on that basis. Often with victims of abuse, there's some concern about the financial implications of seeking support from a solicitor and accessing that help, but legal aid is available for those victims, and indeed MSB Solicitors have a legal aid contract and we're able to provide that support. The regulations for legal aid are quite wide, and even if clients aren't able to perhaps provide evidence through other means, i.e. a report from a health professional, lack of police involvement if they've been too afraid to report that, we can look at other things like emergency injunctions and occupation orders if indeed that person requires immediate support. The first step that I would advise any woman or man in an abusive relationship would be to speak out and to speak to someone that they trust and that they feel confident talking to. Perhaps that may be a close friend or a family member, and to then seek out some legal support really as a starting point. But the support is there and they need to speak to someone, to go and see a solicitor, and then to also consider other options available, i.e. accessing domestic violence support services, of which there are a number in Merseyside, and indeed we have quite close links with, and also there are a number of refuges that will help and support women who are looking for that escape. As a department, we have a number of very experienced solicitors who deal on a day-to-day basis with victims of domestic abuse, and as I said, we do have a legal aid contract contract, so we're able to give funding to victims of domestic abuse to help them access emergency support. And again, I reiterate that we're experienced in dealing with emergency situations and linking in with other agencies and services that would be able to provide a holistic package of support for that victim.